Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. So, this is now my third attempt at making this video because I kept running into some funny problems. So, hopefully, this will go well and I'll be able to upload this because I do really want to share this video. This video, as the title obviously shows you, is about Kenner Star Wars 1985 to 1986. And what I'm referring to is the concepts or proposals that Kenner was putting together for Lucasfilm so they can carry on the Star Wars line beyond the Power of the Force line, or maybe it was going to be Power of the Force. I don't know, but I don't think so. And move it forward into the future uh, with the idea that there was no new movies coming out. So they had to really get creative. And this is from an article on a website called the Star Wars Collectors Archive. And if you haven't looked at this website, there's going to be a link in the description, and there'll be a link to this special feature with where I got this from. Definitely got to check it out. Check out the website; it's a great resource. It was put together by what I would call veteran Star Wars collectors, people that were in there back in the day in the late '80s, early '90s. They have a lot of good information that's still relevant and valid to this day. But what we're looking at here is the special feature for what Kenner was proposing to Lucasfilm to carry on the Star Wars line, as I said. And what this actually is from is a binder that's in the possession of two people who wrote the main article, Lisa Stevens and Vic Wertz. So I want to make sure I give credit to the people that own the binder, I should say, and shared this information. And wrote this special feature that I'm going to be talking about. And again, I highly encourage you to check it out. And again, this 3 ring binder, we're going to see basically it's a PowerPoint presentation I'm showing you of the photos that came from this 3 ring binder that these two individuals possess. And Kenner presented this to Lucasfilm, and the goal was to carry on the Star Wars line. And Kenner got really creative with their plans such that they wrote this storyline. And the storyline is going to be embedded throughout, you know, this presentation, so to speak. Well, I'm not presenting it, so to speak, but this was a presentation back in the day. I assume probably like late '84, early '85. I don't know, but and what this thing is going to do is it's going to showcase a lot of things that they wanted to hopefully produce, and what I'm going to do with it because I'm very interested in the what could have been obviously, and also how certain things actually ended up making their way back into Star Wars. A great example would be Ralph McQuarrie concept art being utilized in the TV show Rebels and throughout other productions as of late. So it's really cool to see that these original concepts somehow made their way into reality. And in this particular situation, this presentation that came forth from this binder, there are things that actually make their way into reality, although maybe not all from Kenner per se or Hasbro, but you'll see as I go along. I will definitely try and pinpoint those things and share some information about those things that weren't in the binder, but how they are relevant for the discussion. So that was a nice, almost 3 minute ramble. So I'm going to get into this, and just so we all aware, if you've never seen this before, I might skip over some things just to save time and just get to the big highlights because I do want to showcase a lot of this stuff. So here we go. All right. Here's a table of contents, and this isn't super exciting. I'm not going to spend too much time, but basically it lays out what's going to be presented in the binder. It includes a couple pages, and we're going to actually look at all this stuff in more detail as we go along. This is a hand written sheet that was added in there that basically looks at the price points of the proposed, vehicles and play sets they're trying to put together. So they have a low price and a high price, but we can get more into detail there. All right. Some of the things we're going to see are going to be concept art. Some of it's going to be concept drawings, and some of it's going to be actual mock-ups of the toys. And then, again, we'll look at some things that actually made it into existence in real life from this binder, or at least might have been inspired from this binder, or who knows. But That being said, this is a concept art for what they wanted Luke to look like in their new version of Star Wars, their post Return of the Jedi Star Wars that Kenner was putting together. There's some more concept art for Han Solo, pretty cool. All right, the first of the mock-ups. A lot of these mock-ups are kit bashed, and this is probably one of my favorite things from this binder. Mongo Beefhead Tribesmen. And this caption says a nearly extinct friendly native group from the planet Tatooine, members of the Rebel Alliance. And this kit bash item here combines several parts from other figures. So the body and head of Tessic is used, or I should say Squidhead. He didn't have the name Tessic back then. The backpack from 4LOM and the arms of Hammerhead. So that's pretty neat. So what can I say? I like the Mongo Beefhead. Even love the name. So one of the things that they were going to do, and this isn't super thrilling, because it's just a photo of Grand Moff Tarkin, was they in their storyline proposed that Tarkin actually survived and escaped the Death Star explosion at the Battle of Yavin, managed to hide out and wait till after the events of Return of the Jedi, after the Battle of Endor, to retry and grow the Imperial remnants, almost like a Thrawn kind of maneuver, except this time it was Tarkin in their Kenner's sort of reimagined storyline for post Return of the Jedi. Well, I can't say really reimagined, but still very cool. Imagine, I should say. So he was going to have um, a role, which I should have included pictures of this, but the Power of the Force 2 line did make a Grand Moff Tarkin figure, and we even got one in the vintage style from the Retro Collection when they released their first wave in 2019. So, all right. The next slide talks about Atha Prime, which was the new baddie. And I'm not going to read the caption. I'll let you go onto the site and read it yourself. But basically, what this caption is, it describes Atha Prime as a genetics master who came about after the Battle of Endor when the Emperor and Vader were gone, coming back to take over territories and lands. And he was Atha Prime was a genetics master, aka the creator of the Clone Wars. So they mentioned the Clone Wars in this, binder in this kind of proposal, which they were referencing the lines used in A New Hope. And there you go. They're saying this Atha Prime was a person that was responsible for the Clone Wars and was taken out, has come out of hiding and is running amok and creating more clones to rule the galaxy and going after the Rebel Alliance. And I didn't quite gather if he goes after the Imperials or not, but still very cool. And then we're going to get the concept art of Atha Prime, which, if you have a keen eye already, you'll know that this concept art was reworked and utilized and became a reality as a toy from the Dark Empire comics. And Kenner, which was then owned by Hasbro at that time, produced a figure for the expanded universe. And the Imperial Sentinel came directly from the design from Atha Prime and was utilized in the Dark Empire comics. All right. Now this is the concept artwork of a clone warrior, not a clone trooper, a clone warrior. And although I never quite saw anything in Star Wars, at least to this point, that really matched up with this design, it is interesting that the clone warriors still don a sort of stormtrooper armor, and they still have a different look to them as the clone troopers did, because they had the stormtrooper armor, but it didn't quite look like a stormtrooper. Eventually evolved to that. So pretty neat that they had that concept going. And George Lucas did somewhat reflect that when he made the clone troopers in the prequels, and their uniforms did evolve. And even by Revenge of the Sith, they were still different looking, but looked more stormtrooper-esque. But pretty neat anyway. So would have been cool to see this figure become a reality. All right, and this is a concept drawing for Blue 4, which apparently is the droid that served as a pilot and confidant to Atha Prime. And I should note that Stephen Sansweet, I can never pronounce his name, produced a lot of information for this article, or he was referenced heavily in this article because he did some type of article from another magazine in 1995. I think it was Toe March or something that he did an article in 1995 and referenced a lot of this material. So he might have even had access to his binder. And so he also, I believe, might have filled in some of the gaps in the Kenner storyline that I'm now relaying to you. Again, check out the website, Star Wars Collectors Archive website, and you can really get involved and look at all their stuff and look at this more in more detail. But again, very cool. All right. And the next thing we have, okay, this is called the Imperial Sentry Droid. Okay, and if you look at it, it's nothing more than a repainted R5 D4 droid. But what's really interesting about this figure, which it does make an appearance in Return of the Jedi on the Death Star, so it is in the films, it did make an appearance in real life as a toy, but not by Kenner and not by Hasbro, but by, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here for my favorite custom figure maker, Stan Solo. I'm going to go to that page or that shot next. So this is Stan Solo's version of that droid, although his is titled R5J2, I believe. But there it is, a custom vintage Star Wars figure produced by Stan Solo. And if without going into a lot of detail because we don't have time for it, I will just say that if you're interested in custom figures, Stan Solo is hands down the number one best producer of custom Star Wars figures in the vintage style. There are others and they're really good, but Stan Solo is, to me, the number one. So, unfortunately, this particular droid is out of production, but still, Stan Solo made it, so it did become a reality. And again, for better or for worse, for if I'm correct or not, you can trace it back to this binder that was put together probably in 1985. So, all right, this is the first in a series of kit bash droids known as the Imperial Attack Droid. This is Attack Droid A, who is comprised of 21B arms, an IG-88 torso, and I'm not sure where they got the blasters for that one on top, but again, Imperial Attack Droid A. Here's Imperial Attack Droid B. So you have the Zuckuss body with 21B arms holding the 4LOM blaster off to the side, which I don't know how that makes it a very tough attacking droid, at least with the blaster. Maybe he's more of a grappler. He kind of gets in and throws people around and smashes them. Who knows? It's also interesting that the head is sort of being replicated with 21B's. It looks like that's 21B's attachment to his mouth, the tube attachment. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting design for a kit bash item. This is my favorite of the three. This is the Imperial Attack Droid C, and this is like a super duper astromech droid. You got parts from FX7 and a power droid, and of course a bazillion missiles. I don't know if those missiles came from somewhere else or Star Wars. I don't know, but pretty cool looking nonetheless. I also noticed that it looks like there's a rocket blaster, a rocket engine at the very bottom of this droid too, which we do know in the prequels R2-D2 actually has rockets in his legs that come out and he can fly. So there's a concept that maybe George Lucas was inspired by that. Who knows? Pretty interesting. All right, this is the Rebel Blockade Runner, and what this is a what do they call this? A foam core model, a 3D foam core model with moving parts. So those turrets, I believe, can be moved and such. And so this was their part of their presentation for a Rebel Blockade Runner, which made its appearance all the way back in the first shot in Star Wars, but they are finally getting around to putting it together for this line. And I'm noticing that it does say Return of the Jedi, so they might have had this concept going back pre-1983, but if we know like the Y-Wing didn't make its appearance till the Return of the Jedi, even though it was in Star Wars and featured prominently. So who knows? Maybe they were playing with that. But they actually did a plastic mock-up of it, and I'm going to show that next. And this wasn't in the binder. Here's the Blockade Runner in this plastic mock-up. So it's pretty neat to see, even though it's a black and white photo. And just to kind of point out the features on it, this is what the bullet points say, which you may or may not be able to see. It says, opening cockpit, manually operated front laser cannons, escape pod jettisons, and accommodates R2D2 and C3PO, which would be awesome. Movable radar dish also accommodates one action figure. Battery operated rear cannons and engine lights for ages 4 and up, and a case pack of 4. So I guess they were intending to sell this in a pack of 4. Pretty cool, though. This is nothing more than the Ewok Battle Wagon. This is probably a prototype. Obviously, this got put into production in 1985 in the Power of the Force line. Here's an A-Wing, again, a prototype, which actually made it into production in the Droids line in 1985. And here's the Tatooine Skiff, another prototype that was eventually put into production in the Power of the Force line. All right, there were 2 pages missing in the binder, pages 21 and 22, which related to an X-Wing and a tandem X-Wing. But the tandem X-Wing, actually, there was a photo reference, and I think it was contained in a Galaxy Collector magazine article, as the website states, or in the hardcover version of the second edition of Tomark's Price Guide to Worldwide Star Wars Collectibles. But what we're looking at here is the tandem X-Wing, which you can see tandem meaning there's 2 pilots. Very interesting that the pilot in the front has the visor painted on, which is reminiscent of the Luke X-Wing, or Snowspeeder, I guess you could say, pilot they produced for the retro Empire Strikes Back line that they did from Hasbro. Also interesting to note that the fuselage is longer to accommodate the second pilot in cockpit. In the black paint, it does remind me of Poe Dameron's X-Wing, because he had the black X-Wing. So maybe the sequel trilogy took a little inspiration from this. Who knows? Here's the concept art for the Skyhopper, which we know eventually was created. And this is obviously not in the binder, but it eventually became to fruition and was created in the Power of the Force line in 1996. So that's super cool that came about, even though the concept art's a little bit different than what actually was produced. And by the way, this is a super cool toy, and I actually own it, even though I collect mostly vintage, just because I think it's almost an integral piece of vintage Star Wars. So even though it wasn't made, but should have been made. Again, the binder said so. All right. Nothing fancy here other than a land speeder, with the exception that I think that they may have been intending to re-release certain vehicles under the new logo of whatever this logo would be. Now, I don't know if this would have been a Power of the Force logo that this new storyline would have taken place, or if they would come up with a new title and a new logo for it. But they maybe were going to put out some of the older vehicles and repackage them in the updated, most modern toy line boxes. Kind of like how certain vehicles might have premiered in Star Wars and carried on Empire Strikes Back. A great example would be an X-Wing. You had the X-Wing started in the Star Wars line. It was in the Empire Strikes Back line. Then eventually was changed to Battle Damage, but it made it across 2 different lines. The Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And that was true with other vehicles as well, as they cycled in new vehicles and cycled out old vehicles. But they also brought back certain vehicles as well. The Land Speeder, Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, and Dewback were all put in special collector boxes in 1983 during the Return of the Jedi run. They had a Star Wars logo, but they had the collector's item stamp or burst, I think is what you call it, on the box. So who knows? That's what I think they would have been doing, and why you'll see in further slides more older vehicles in this presentation binder. All right. This was a kit bashed XP36. And I got to tell you, this thing, I'm not sure exactly where they got the pieces from, but this thing looks cool. I would have loved having this speeder as a kid. Modified, highly performant, and lightly armored land speeder. So, thing's pretty serious. This is the XP38 concept drawing. And we're going to get another shot of it as well. Some more concept drawings. Now, the first concept drawing was in the binder. These 2 were not, but I just wanted to provide them as well. This has never made it into production, but what's notable is this is the XP38 land speeder that Luke references when he sells his family land speeder, or his land speeder, I should say, to the junk dealer in Mos Eisley. And he says it wasn't going for as much ever since the XP38s came out. Well, there you go. They took that reference and we're going to produce the toy for it. All right, here's a Rebel Armor Snow Speeder. Nothing fancy here. again, might have been re-released in the new logo, or the new line, I should say, of whatever this was going to be, whether it was Power of the Force or whatever they were going to call it. But then you have the Rebel Armored Sand Speeder. And I would have loved this thing. Besides a different color, you notice that there's a bunch of extra weaponry on it. Dual laser cannons on the front. It looks like there's a double or dual laser turret on the back of it. Then I also see um, two extra wings on it. So that's really cool as well. Would have loved to have that thing. All right, here is the, let me get to see what this is called, the Rebel SRV-1 Scout and Retrieval Vehicle, which I'm going to show a series of concepts. Actually, excuse me, there's going to be a concept picture, but there's also going to be some other photos of this as well. There was a lot of documentation on this one. Now, in the binder, this was the photo they had. And this thing, again, harkens back to like almost something that, has a G.I. Joe Snowcat feel to it. But I think, too, that the rear back, which looks like a truck bed, probably could have fit some mini rigs. And they made a bunch of mini rigs for the Hoth and the Empire Strikes Back line. So, and this might have dated back to the Empire Strikes Back line and got revisited for this presentation. Here's some more shots of it here from an earlier concept. So this is a little bit different than the photo you see in the binder. And again, this isn't from the binder, but if you look, you could see there in that front shot, there was no glass canopies. So earlier model. Here's the concept drawing. Very cool. All right, this one here I'm going to spend a little more time on. This is the Millennium Falcon cargo handler. So this was going to be a mini rig, and this is what was presented in the binder. And you could see how it would attach to the Millennium Falcon. So if you had the Millennium Falcon, now you could get this added onto it, which is really cool. Now, if you also notice with this how the guns laid on too, it's a really neat thing. It's almost like a little fighter pod almost. Kind of reminds me of Rebels and the Ghost ship when you think about it, because the Ghost had, I forgot the name of it now, it escapes me, the little smaller ship that detached from the Ghost that could fly around. So I think it was called the Phantom now that I think about it. I could be wrong. But anyway, so it kind of has that concept. But if you look, there's additional shots of it. These were not from the binder. This was from another source. Again, super cool, showing you all the angles for it. But this, although maybe didn't make it into the toy production, it did make it into reality in the Star Wars Solo movie. Here's a picture of that the Millennium Falcon back, at least the concept of the Millennium Falcon back from the movie Solo. And if you notice, that front piece is where it gets shot off when they're in the Kessel Run and they take that detour outside of the established flight path and they go into sort of the middle of that maw or whatever it's called, and they run into that crazy space tentacle creature and they shoot that front cargo piece off, or cargo or escape pod, whatever it was. They shoot that thing to get the big creature to chase it. There you go. It made it into the film. So whether or not the original inspiration was from this binder or not, or from somewhere else, I don't know, but super cool nonetheless. All right, the Bantha. That had been in discussion, I think, way back during the original film from 1978, 79. They were probably trying to get out in the Star Wars line. Never made it, and Hasbro eventually made it, and they made it with real fur. So that was pretty neat on the Power of the Force 2 line. But I'm going to showcase another one of Stan Solo's items. Stan Solo made a wonderful vintage version of this, and if you take a look at that, and if you look at the other picture, I'll go back to it real quick. He really hit the details really well from that. Now, there was actually a mock-up that I didn't pull up, but there was also a mock-up prototype of this as well, which this doesn't look a lot like the prototype. This looks more like the concept art. And I own one of these as well as owning the other droid I showed earlier in the video. This thing is awesome. So just want to make another point that, there's some pretty cool things out there. And in this case, it wasn't, Hasbro that really delivered on a vintage style Bantha, but more so Stan Solo did, and did it quite well. So super awesome. So have to put that put that plug for the Bantha because it is cool. All right, almost done here. Here's the concept drawings for the TIE Bomber, which eventually became realized, although it was a die-cast item back in the day in the vintage line, for the 3 3/4 action figure line, which is what they were aiming for. It eventually came out in 2002 in the Power of the Jedi line. It was produced many times after that. But it did make it. So Kenner did go back and they did make it. So, or I should say Hasbro at this point. So that is cool. All right. All right. Here is the Imperial Sniper. And this was in the binder. And it's a pretty neat drawing. Additional shots or photos, or I should say drawings, not from the binder are shown here. It kind of gives you not just the same side view, but you also get an angular view. Pretty neat. And it seems like this drawing eventually made its way into what were two Power of the Force mini rigs, and I'll show the picture of those. You get the sniper vehicle and the security scout seem to be a combination of, or seem like they seem to be a separation of what combined might have been the sniper that we just saw. So pretty neat that those concepts sort of made their way and became a reality. Maybe not in totality, but still became a reality. So very cool. Okay, another AT-AT, nothing fancy. Probably was going to be repackaged in the new line with a new logo, whatever it was going to be. And one of the last kit bashed photos we have is this ATIC, all-terrain ion cannon. And it is exactly what you think. They cut off the back of an AT-AT and they mounted a Death Star gun. They changed the barrel somewhat to look more like a traditional cannon as compared to a laser blaster. But there you go. You got a stormtrooper controlling that ion cannon that's mounted on the back of an AT-AT. Pretty wild. Of course, you only could aim that thing from the rear, so I'm not sure that would work in battle functionality. But in either case, I would have loved to have had this as a kid. I would love to have this as now. And as a matter of fact, I've seen someone on one of the Facebook groups that's actually customized and making one of those. So whoever that person is, kudos to you. That's awesome. Way to go. And then the last couple of things we're going to see, this is the Annihilator, which is a double-decker, I believe, Star Destroyer by Atha Prime. I believe that's who gets to control. That's his the command ship. So that's just a concept drawing. And then this is the Apex Invader, which is a smaller fighter ship that Atha Prime would have. So pretty cool. No mock-ups in terms of actual toys or around as far as I know, but still pretty neat. They were thinking pretty cool again with the storyline. And then the last thing we get is the Imperial Outpost. Now this thing here, just looking at, it's a combination of the Death Star laser cannons from the actual tower laser cannons, the shield generator from Endor, and there's a bunker you can see down below. And of course, if you notice, the AT-ATs, if this thing was built to scale, this thing would have been huge because that AT-AT's off to the side, and obviously probably wasn't coming with that playset. But this thing, had it been built, would have been awesome. And I believe someone referenced, because this is certainly not going to be the only video that's been on this particular feature in the Star Wars Collector's Archive. I think another video person mentioned that someone actually put one of these together and custom made one. So I'm going to have to go check that out. But this would have been a mega playset. And when you think about 1985, what I'm thinking about, I go to G.I. Joe, because I mentioned Snowcat earlier. You know, G.I. Joe was making some pretty big playsets by that time. I mean, we're not talking USS Flag here, but the Terradrome is what I'm thinking of. This is kind of Terradrome level in terms of just the size of it. So would have been really cool to have. But anyway, I think this was a great video to showcase. Again, some other people might have done it, but before in the past. But I wanted to showcase it for everyone because I love thinking about what might actually could have been and what actually did come out of this. I think it's fascinating to see the roots and the inspiration of Star Wars, especially when you go back to the earlier days and people really were using their imaginations and had less to work with and less to build off of. So it's really cool stuff. So Again, I encourage you to check out the Star Wars Collectors Archive. There's a link in the description. I encourage you to check out Stan Solo Creations.